Hi there. Welcome back to the Real Film Chronicles podcast. As always, I'm Nathan.
And I'm Brian.
And in today's very special episode, we're going to be talking about a little film called Duel. Now, Brian.
Fantastic.
You turned me on to this movie. How did this movie get onto your radar?
You know what? I know we've mentioned this in the past, and like both of us are on Letterboxd, and we peruse lists every so often. And this movie came up somewhere in like somebody's anticipated movies of 2022.
Okay.
And I was like, oh, okay, this looks decent. Like I kind of like the description of the movie. Karen Gillan is always pretty good in what she does. And I put it on my watch list thinking, okay, this is great. And I thought this must be streaming on Netflix or Amazon Prime or something right now. And I was shocked to discover that it was not anywhere. In fact, it was just a very limited theatrical release at the time. Fast forward a few weeks and I'm perusing movie listings in my area, and one of the independent theaters here actually had this playing on a Thursday night at like 8:30. And I'm looking around at the other listings. It's the only showtime for this movie in my city in the next 2 weeks. And it's like, oh, that's really interesting. That is a limited release. So I said, screw it. I got to go support local theater, and I got to go support these presumably indie movies. I mean, I don't recognize the director or anything here, just the main couple of actors. And I dragged one of my friends out to see this, had a great time at the theater, and then it's just sort of out there now. That's kind of how I came across the movie. It was just see the poster, read the description, check it out on a whim. And that's how I got familiar with this film.
Buy the ticket, take the ride.
Right? Sometimes you just have to go to the movies without really knowing what you're getting into. I really had no expectations for this film at all going into it. Never saw a trailer for it or anything.
Yeah, no, I had never heard about this movie until you literally mentioned it. I think last week.
It has a pretty low viewer count on Letterboxd. I'm looking at it right now. It's like about 9,000 people have logged this, which I think is fairly low. But I'll just read the description here from the thing.
Yep, perfect.
A terminally ill woman opts for a cloning procedure to ease her loss on her friends and family. When she makes a miraculous recovery, her attempts to have her clone decommissioned fail and lead to a court-mandated duel to the death. So really the plot of this movie, like the overall story, is pretty simple. Like I thought it was pretty basic. Like in this society, and it's clearly kind of like a different universe, different reality than our own, right? Where cloning is an act of everyday life. You can have a clone made of yourself if you know you're going to die in the next little while. And so Karen Gillan, playing Sarah, is treated with some condition, some disease. She's going to die. They can't tell her when it's going to happen, but she signs up for what they call replacement, where you get a clone of yourself done, and you have a few months or until you die to sort of bring your clone up to speed on your life and have them replace you. They would take over her life. So Sarah's double, and that's basically her name in the movie, Sarah's double, will become Sarah. Like the title of Sarah is given to her. So in this case, Sarah recovers from this disease about a year after being diagnosed with it. And now the clone, Sarah's double, has been around long enough that she wants to live her life. And when they say decommissioned, that's basically saying, yeah, we're just going to take your clone out back and have them destroyed because we can't have two Sarahs running around, right? And that's essentially the main conflict. That's the main motivator of the film, is that the clone wants to survive and live. And that means, the courts, the society has a system in place for determining which Sarah will get to live, is that they have a duel to the death. So much of the movie is Sarah preparing for this duel to the death. Before we get into any major spoilers, although that might have been somewhat spoilery right there, there's not, we won't talk about the end of the movie without talking about the end of the film. What was your overall impression of the movie? How did you feel about it after watching it?
Well, without mincing words here, I think you owe me for making me watch this thing.
Oh, really? Okay.
It was pretty terrible. I can't believe that a movie featuring 2 Karen Gillans, I hated it so much. Like, you have to work hard where you give me double the Karen Gillans and still make me hate the movie. Yeah, I thought it was interesting.
So you actively like hated this film.
It was god awful, from the writing to the narrative. It was a really, this is the thing too, is like, you told me about the movie. I looked up description of the movie going into it. I was like, this sounds like a really cool, high concept kind of sci-fi fantasy idea. I was like, okay. Like, it's always fun to play with these ideas. Like, what if, like what if in the future people could get clones, and that cloning technology was used specifically for people to help grieving families. Like, okay, that's an interesting conceit, but it was just, this was not the movie to pull it off. Like, the overly self-serious tone to the dialogue that sounded like it was written by an AI that had once studied human dialogue and human behavior and tried to emulate it, failing miserably. Just to the narrative, like, even the world building is like, oh yeah, we have clones and we have this horrific fight to the death sometimes, but like the rest of society, there was nothing else in society that seemed to be built around that. Like, it just seemed like so glaring out of place. Like, it seemed like our society, but this with like this one random for murder. I was like, it just seems so incongruous.
Yeah, like the film only focuses on this one specific aspect of, like, we don't know if there's other situations where clones would, like, what they have, what their purpose is. It's like, in this society, at least in this city, it's like clones are only there to replace people who are dying, but surely there must be some other use cases for this. And the film, I think, doesn't even pretend to try and get into that.
At one time, Sarah mentions like, oh, I thought those duels to the death were for like criminals who had committed crimes worse than murder. But even that, I don't understand. What's the punishment? Like, they create a clone of this person who's incarcerated and they force them to try and kill each other, and then the winner gets to live. Does he go back to jail then? Or does it get released back into society, the person or the clone? Like, I don't know. They don't mention it.
No, they don't mention it. And I'm kind of curious on that one too, like, just as an aside, where maybe they make a clone of those people who have committed crimes more serious than murder, have them duel to the death, and then the clone, in my mind, wouldn't have the same inclinations to do horrible things. But in that case, you'd probably just want to kill the criminal and just keep the clone around. But the duel to the death is basically, in this movie, establishing that you are going to become that person regardless if you were the double or not. So you'd just be sent back to jail, which is kind of a weird thing. Maybe there's a prison overcrowding situation and they decide that duels to the death or how it's dealt with in the future.
Is that the method of execution? Like, you have to be killed by yourself? If you're like a child molester, do they just like create a clone and have, like, is that the punishment? Is like, you have to be killed by yourself and then we kill the clone too? Just like, we get, like, it's a crime so nice we kill you twice. It's like, I don't know, like.
Because then it's no longer like the state or somebody killing you, like in the death penalty, it's yourself killing you. And that's an ethically okay situation there. Yeah,
and there's a lot of, like, I think you brought it up kind of tangentially here, but the idea of like nature versus nurture, right? Which I think the film, like, that would have been a really interesting place to go to. I think it touches on it really briefly in terms of like how Sarah's double like develops her own kind of personality and her own quirks. And they go to that, there's a survivor support group. I guess we're into full spoilers here. But there's like a dual survivor support group. And like the one guy's talking about like the guy and his clone obviously had a romantic relationship. The other dude, like, I guess the original guy had killed himself and that's why he had the clone made. And the guy's like, oh, I'm stuck with all this family and friends. I don't like these people, but I'm forced to be with them now because you brought me into this world.
Yeah.
And so there's all this like, oh, these are really interesting concepts to explore. Like you were talking about, like, like if you clone somebody who was in jail for, like, if you cloned Ted Bundy, would he, and you grew that clone, would he still be a psychopath that went out and murdered people? Or was it something, was it completely genetic? Or is it the way he was raised and brought up? If you raised him separate, like all these interesting philosophical questions that are completely ignored for focusing on some of the worst dialogue I've ever heard in my entire life. I had to look it up. I thought for certain, it's like I was looking for explanations. The dialogue was so terrible. I was like, well, maybe, I was like, given the benefit of the doubt, maybe it's like a non-native English speaker. So maybe it's somebody for whom English isn't their first language. And they're having, I was like, there's a, they can forgive that. It's like, no, the guy's born in Texas. Born and raised in Texas.
Riley
USA.
Stearns is the director and writer.
Yeah. And it's like, there's no, like, I know there's like, listen, I love certain movies where you have like stylized dialogue. Like, good example is Quentin Tarantino. Nobody talks like Quentin Tarantino characters in real life, obviously.
Yeah.
But his writing, his dialogue, it's interesting to listen to. It's incredibly engaging. Nobody talks in those kind of monologues or big speeches like this. But this was just like, it was a chore to sit through after the first 20 minutes or so of that kind of dialogue of people, like, and the behavior was just so non-human. Like, I was like, there was a scene in the doctor's office where the doctor was talking about different funeral types as though Sarah had never heard of funerals before. Like, who talks like this? Like, what is going on? Like, it was so, and I know there's like the underlying theme of like society's, disassociation from the horrors of murder and like how we devalue human life. And so it was like almost like using language as a distancing tool, but like, I don't know. It didn't work for me at all.
Yeah. Interesting. I mean, it's kind of interesting where you say like Tarantino dialogue, nobody in reality talks that way. And that's kind of fine. That's a pass, but it's like, here's a different reality represented in this movie where people don't talk like normal people, and it's not a pass here. And is it just because of like the pacing of it, like the content, the delivery? Like, why does one get a pass, one doesn't?
Well, one is done well, and the other one is just like, I don't know if it must have been done intentionally. One thing I will say positive about the writing of this and the dialogue in this is that anybody aspiring to be a writer or a filmmaker, you can see the kind of like, if this can get made into a movie or if this passes inspection to get funding, anything you're working on can possibly get made, kids out there. It's like, this sets the bar so low.
Wow.
In terms of dialogue, it's like, watch this movie if you want to boost for your own writing, because invariably, like 99% of the people out there trying to get their screenplays published is going to be better written than this. But it's just like, it's trying to be robotic and cold.
Pretty scathing review right there.
I mean, I got to call it like I see it. It was like, after the first 20 minutes, Brian, I was kind of cursing you a bit because I was like, it felt like homework watching this.
Yeah, you texted me with that line before about this felt like a computer had like written this, like an AI had written this. And it's funny because it's almost a meme on the internet where you see these AI generated stories and like episodes of TV, and they're very disjointed and like they don't make much sense. And are they real, or are they just an excuse for people to write really weird fiction, right?
Like, I'm wondering if the director took one of those random scripts he saw online and just as a prank decided to make a movie out of it. I don't know. Is this guy, what's his name? Riley Stearns?
Stearns, yeah.
Is he independently wealthy? Is this movie just like a gag to like, or is he trolling the world? I don't know. Like, did he just do this like on a whim to troll his friends? I don't get it.
Like, he previously wrote and directed The Art of Self-Defense, which I think is a Jesse Eisenberg is in that.
Yeah,
and that one was on my radar for a bit. I just never got around to watching it, and I think it's probably going to be a very similar style of dialogue and delivery.
Oh, I hope not. I was so looking forward to The Art of Self-Defense. It's been on my radar for a while too, and it was a really interesting concept. But now I'm just like, is everyone going to talk like an alien watching humans for the first time and trying to emulate their behavior? Yes. Hello, fellow human. I too enjoy ice cream because it is cold and sweet. I'm like...
I thought the movie was hilarious. I thought the dialogue was hilarious. I liked how stripped back
not intentionally
the dialogue was.
Right?
Like how, no, it was intentionally hilarious to me. Like I thought it was written to be like that. I thought it was written to be a lot of like emotion and context removed in this society where people, like the doctor is just speaking frankly to her in a hilarious way because people don't really know how to talk to one another. So it's like, here's just the facts, right? It's like these people don't know how to deal with their emotions or something. So it's just like, it results in this kind of stunted dialogue that is just kind of to the point. I'm not sure. Like,
I was laughing throughout, but I was not laughing for intentional. I don't think it was intentional, the laughs they got from me.
Like the doctor scene specifically, and I can't remember. Maybe I'll just try and insert the dialogue into the film, into the episode here afterwards.
I'm trying to find the dialogue for you.
Yeah, the doctor's trying to explain like what the chances, because she's saying, all right, you have this incurable disease. There's a 98% chance of like you're going to die from this, and that 2% chance is just the margin of error. So 100% you're going to die. And this whole thing was hilarious, and the confusion back and forth. But the delivery, the dialogue going back and forth was just, I thought it was fantastic. And the doctor was trying to explain it as saying, you are a baseball player. You have a curveball because life has thrown you a curveball. And in this situation, you're the batter and you don't have a bat. So there's zero chance that you're going to be able to hit this curveball coming towards you. I thought it was hilarious. That's one of my favorite lines in the film.
It would have been funny if it was played for, but the whole movie took itself so seriously that if they
I don't think it was taking itself seriously.
I think it was super dramatic.
It knew what it was doing.
It did not know. It was totally mismatched. Oh,
I did not get that super dramatic. I thought the whole movie was kind of tongue in cheek. It was almost like a black comedy.
It was not a black.
Like I think they knew exactly what they were doing.
No, it was completely off base.
Come on,
no,
like so the one of the intro scenes is all right. Hold on a second. One of the intro scenes is hilarious. She is going home. She's on the couch and she starts watching internet pornography, right? And then she gets a call from her boyfriend. Meanwhile, the video is like on in the background of this video chat on her laptop. It's hilarious. If you look at the title of the film she's watching, it's like some kind of orgy in the backyard of a house that is confirmed to be haunted. And I love that little like tidbit. You could probably, I missed it the first time I watched the film in the theater. But the second time I was like, oh, like that is hilarious to me. It's just like, this is a pornography in a haunted house. This is the society they live in. It was just funny. And then having the dialogue, the serious stuff with her boyfriend, because their relationship is super strained and they're having a really hard time talking to one another. And she's so disconnected from the boyfriend and everything else that nothing is matching there. I thought it was great. Like, I think the film knew exactly what it was doing by like throwing something like that at you.
I did not get that at all. To me, like the whole thing was played like, I was really surprised because I thought it was going to be like more absurdist and more dark humor, but it was like everyone was playing.
It was quite absurd.
It was absurd, but it wasn't shot highlighting absurd. It was played straight. Everyone was all super serious all the time. Like there was no like that tongue in cheek winking at the camera kind of thing. I did not see that at all.
No.
We watched two different movies, I think, Brian.
It was really interesting. I mean, the two different perspectives on it. Like, I got a lot out of this movie.
Does IMDb not have quotes from the movie anymore? Am I just like not seeing this? Did they change their layout?
Yeah, they might have changed their layout. I remember trying to find one a few months ago, and it's like, I'm not sure if it was just hidden. Maybe it's like behind a paid tier of like IMDb Pro now. But yeah, no, I thought there was a lot of good things happening. So I mean, obviously we're into spoilers there before I officially wanted to go in, but sort of progress with the plot of the movie. She partners up with Aaron Paul's character, Trent, to do self-defense, right? And I love that line too, where it's just one of the doctors is just like, oh, sorry, not the doctor, the guy at the replacement program, or they're talking about the duel, is just like, oh, you might want to like, find out like how to fight or something like personal fighting. And then she's like literally enrolling in a program for this guy named the exact same thing that the doctor just mentioned. So he's going to teach her a lot of not just self-defense, but like he's going to teach her like how to kill her clone that's out in the world. And it's just sort of quite a bit of montage there. I mean, the movie isn't very long. It's 90 minutes. So it's sort of,
again, one of its only saving graces. Ugh. It was over quick. They could have been quick. They could have cut like an hour off this movie and I would have been fine with it.
Well, geez, yeah. It is what it is, I guess. I guess, I mean, what are you giving this movie as a star rating? Like, should I even ask if it want to get a star ratings rating?
Now? I mean,
we may as well.
Maybe half, similar to 1/2 to 1. I don't know.
Half a star.
It was I'm still struggling to comprehend what I witnessed. There were a few scenes where Karen Gillan was allowed to actually act. Like when she was breaking down in the car, I was like, okay, like they're actually like, the director knows that the actors are able to act and he's letting them act finally. But But like the whole
You
thing
didn't think that was part of the character? Like she mentioned before that she's like, oh, but one of the issues of like facing your own mortality initially was that she did not cry and she thought that something was wrong with her. I mean, she tells the doctor, oh, it's weird that I did not cry when I found out this news type of thing. And then she does break down afterwards, right?
But like, yeah, but other than that is like I thought it was like, is the big reveal going to be that everyone's like an android? And I don't know, like, because like no one was emoting at all, and it made zero sense. Like even like
I think nobody was emoting in Sarah's world, because when we sort of go over to, well, no, even then, like the mother is very distant, right? And that was also, I thought it was hilarious.
That makes sense. The mother's distance, that kind of made sense. But the whole mother-daughter relationship, I was like, everything in the movie was just so stereotypical. It's like, oh, the mother is nagging her daughter because she's not living up to her expectations. The boyfriend, like, there was just the whole relationship thing making Sarah's life terrible. It just seems so emotionally manipulative and in such an obvious way. It's like her boyfriend was obviously cheating on her, obviously not interested anymore. And like the whole scene where she goes to talk to her mom, and she confronts her mom and her boyfriend Peter and her clone, where her mom and her boyfriend have a closer relationship with her clone than she does, and she gets like essentially like they're all against her in a
they've already essentially replaced her, because they don't like her.
Absurdly emotionally manipulative, obvious way that like if he'd gone through any more than one draft of the script, anybody would have made this better. A first-year writing student at university would have made this better.
Well, I want to see your draft of this
Peter
movie.
Takes her outside, and she gets locked out of the house after Peter tells her off. I was like, there's like, go another way to show.
That played out.
It's just so emotionally manipulative, and it wouldn't be so bad if it wasn't just like such an obvious. It's the equivalent of it was all just a dream at the end. Like that's how bad the writing was.
Ooh, not even close.
Yes,
no, not even close.
Terrible.
Man. That's brutal.
Yeah,
I thought you might appreciate some of the dialogue here. I thought it was pretty smart, but after that one text, I thought maybe I'll just message you, say don't bother watching the rest of the movie if you're 20 minutes in and can't handle this. But I was getting like glimpses of The Lobster and the dialogue from there and how interesting that dialogue was, and it really made me think to how different movies, like some directors will exactly as you said earlier, some directors would like Quentin Tarantino will leave their mark on the dialogue. And I was thinking like Noah Baumbach writes really interesting dialogue and like people talking over one another. And I thought this was a really pretty unique approach to it for an interesting concept. Like they don't need much of a concept to work on here. And I thought he wrote a pretty smart script here that was funny, and
they did not have much of a concept. You're right about that. But talking about The Lobster I really enjoyed, and you're right, it had very stylized
I'm surprised.
Language like Yorgos Lanthimos, and I'm probably mispronouncing that. Yeah, but the thing is like his tone matched the dialogue, and like Yorgos was a lot better at matching that absurdist tone, and you could tell it's like it felt like you were in on the joke, right? Like it felt like you were in on the dark comedy. It felt like you were in on those absurdist
I guess you weren't in on the joke in this one.
And this one
I definitely felt
like
in on it this time.
I did not feel like I was in it. I felt like I was not laughing along with the movie. I thought I was laughing at the movie at how hilariously bad it was. Like it was just.
Well, not every movie's for every person, I guess.
I mean,
I was loving every second of this film. I was actually, because I watched it in the theater.
What?
Yeah, let me finish. I was at the theater watching this, and afterwards, I was kind of speechless. Like, wow, that was really good. I turned to my friend, what do you think? He's just like, that was really good. And then I'm going to watch it again for this recording. And I was actually worried that maybe the movie was going to be too slow or something. I wasn't going to get into it. This was the second part of a double feature for me on a Saturday night. And my attention was there the entire time. I was loving like every second of this movie. I thought it was really good.
I'm looking around in surprise in my room right now because I'm waiting for Ashton Kutcher and a camera crew to jump out because I feel like you're
and just for your listeners, poorly acted looking around your room.
It's like you're not trolling me right now.
There's no punk root. No, there's no trolling. I really enjoy this movie. The fact that you're giving it a half star is almost kind of offensive towards movies in general.
This movie is offensive to all movies in general.
We've talked about worse movies than this, and you've given it a couple stars because of like decent production value. It's like, oh, there were no crew visible in the shot, so it gets 1.5 stars. This one, you actively hate it, and this might be.
Listen,
this is a peek into the future for the bottom 5 of 2022. This is gonna be your number one worst movie of the year.
This is worse than Kimmy already. Like I thought Kimmy was going to be the worst.
And Kimmy was also a pretty decent film too.
It was terrible. It was god awful film, and this one was even worse.
I'm kind of questioning. Yeah.
We're kind of watching all the Michael Bay movies. We're going to do an episode of Michael Bay, and I
can't wait for the 0-star reviews to come in.
Even my worst rated Transformers movie.
I mean, you want to talk about poor dialogue in the Transformers movies? I mean, you're talking 1/4-star reviews of these movies then.
No, this was so it was offensively
You're saying
bad.
Transformers has better writing than this?
It has better dialogue, which is a very low bar to clear. But they sound at least like
and to think years ago you were defending like the prequel movies as being like really good, and now I'm hearing you talk about
they are really
the dialogue in this movie.
Dialogue in the prequels was better than this by a landslide. What are you talking about?
I mean, the dialogue in the prequel movies is a meme on how awful it is because Lucas pieced together multiple takes of actors not acting in tandem with each other, right? At least this one, they were in the same room acting against each other.
People were in the same room acting in the prequels. But like, I don't know, like you can't compare like the dialogue written in, this dialogue was not, I don't know how like the actors were, you could tell the actors were having a hard time because every once in a while,
really,
you'd see when they had like a simple line, like, oh, what the fuck was that? Right. It's like when they, like somebody was surprised, like, oh, there's an actor displaying, there's an actor.
You thought
acting.
those were like flubs in the movie?
I think those got through because most of the dialogue was so stilted, and even the actors, you could tell they were having a hard time with this stilted delivery. They didn't know how to deliver, like, say these lines properly. I can't blame them because no human being. I mean, it's not just that no human being would talk like this. Because, like, you look at Aaron Sorkin's script, another stylized dialogue too. Like, nobody in real life talks like Aaron Sorkin characters, right? But at least, like,
obviously,
all the words, and syntax, and grammar, it flows off the tongue. Like you can still read it out, and it sounds like human beings speaking, although in a highly stylized way. This one didn't seem like human beings talking. It felt almost like like the whatever the computer program is, like reading out, like the screen reader reading off words on the page. Like it's almost like
text-to-speech stuff.
Yeah, it's almost like the director like played for the actors like text-to-speech dialogue and like just do that. Imitate this robot voice talking. I don't know. It was just
okay. So moving on from that, I just want to read a couple quotes from Wikipedia here. Everyone can access this sort of thing, but I thought this was a good quote from a movie critic, Peter DeBruge. Duel is in fact a fairly astute comedy. The laughs come not from jokes so much as sharp jabs of truth, wince-inducing insights into the subjects most movies won't touch, like our fear of death, intimacy, and being forgotten.
What?
The movie sits at 79% on Rotten Tomatoes. On Letterboxd, it's sitting at about 3.2 average stars on, as I said earlier, about 9,000 views. And there's a couple other positive quotes, obviously, from Wikipedia, but we won't necessarily get into them. You haven't asked me what my rating is on it, but I'll get into it now.
No, sorry.
I gave the movie... Yeah.
No, go ahead.
I gave the movie 4.5 stars on my first viewing of the movie.
What?
And I would still keep it at 4.5 stars. I mean, I don't think it worked on every single level to give it all that extra half star, but I thought this movie really worked for me.
My mind is being blown right now.
I thought it was really funny. I thought the subject matter was really interesting. I like this little glimpse, and I don't need all the extra world building for myself personally. I just like the hyper focus on this one aspect of the society. I think Karen Gillan played the dual role really well because there's a lot going on where the clone is not an exact clone, right? And I like when she's watching the promo video of how it speaks to her character of how impatient she is watching a promo video for the cloning process, and she's skipping ahead like in it, like she's not that interested in learning everything. And even in the promo video, they're basically saying the clone is not going to really come out to be exactly as you, and most families find that acceptable. I thought that was hilarious. You probably hated that line, with the delivery, but man, I thought it was really interesting. And then having the clone really fall into the same traps that Sarah does as well. I mean, her relationship with her mother falls into the same sequence that it did before. So these two clones are a little more closer than we had maybe previously thought. I think it was kind of a neat commentary on like almost like that honeymoon phase of like a relationship where it's like Sarah is also getting bored of it. Her husband is not putting up with the little things that start cheating on her, but she doesn't really care that much. And eventually the clone kind of falls into the same thing. And then of course we find out that they're kind of lies, right? Because the clone basically kills Sarah outside the duel and then takes on her life. And the mother and the boyfriend are basically in on it, right?
Yeah.
That's pretty much all I got to say on that, really.
Yeah. Again, this is the problem too. It's not just the dialogue was poorly written and took me out of the film. Just like the character motivations didn't make sense. Like the whole first part of the movie where they're trying to like make Sarah feel isolated, where her boyfriend didn't love her, her mother was disapproving. So I almost felt like it was like so over the top. It felt like misery porn, where it was supposed to like make Sarah so
like you
miserable.
didn't get a sense that she brought that on herself though. Like her misery was her own doing because she did not like talking to her mom and everything.
I never got a sense of that. It was like the mother was like blaming her for not wanting to talk to her, but the only interactions we saw were the mother nagging her about stuff. Right? It's like, well, why do you want to be in a toxic relationship? Why is it always on? It was so, that's what I talk about the film being kind of so blatantly kind of emotionally manipulative. Is like, it doesn't give like, it's not like a complex story of like, oh, they had this backstory where like, oh, maybe, somebody died or like their parents broke up and she married a new guy and she never forgave him from her mother for that or something. That's cliche. It's off the top of my head, but like give something in the background where it's like complex instead of these stereotypical is like, oh, my boyfriend's on a trip and he keeps talking about Sam. It's obviously Sam can be a short form for a man or a woman's name. And it's like, oh, I'm going out for dinner with Sam. And it's like, he's obviously cheating on her. And like the stuff he tells her outside her own mother's house is so completely insensitive. Even if you're breaking up with somebody, it's just so over the top insensitive. It was like, you're telegraphing is like, oh, this woman's life is so miserable because everybody in her life hates her and she can't even, and like this clone took over her own life. It's like, yeah, I feel like I was getting smacked in the face with a 2x4. It's like, yeah, like this is like here's the theme. It's like you're supposed to feel terrible for Sarah. You're supposed to like she's supposed to be a terrible life. It's like, yeah, I get it because there's no subtlety in the right or no subtext and everything's text. So yeah, that whole thing. But even like the whole ending point was so narratively and inconsistent. It was inconsistent for the narrative and inconsistent for the characters. Or the scene before you'd seen at that support group for dual survivors, where the clone comes and gets Sarah herself, and they go and sit there, and they have like this kind of like emotional bond. And it's like, oh yeah, like instead of fighting the duel, let's both run away together and we'll cross the border. Not sure which border because I don't think they specifically say what country they're in. Somewhere in Europe because they're driving on the steering wheels on the other side of the car. I think in some shots anyway. Some shots it's on the left and some shots it's on the right. So I'm not sure exactly where.
Really, I never saw that. I saw them driving on the North American side of the roads there.
Yeah, it's weird. It's like sometimes they were. I'm thinking about it now. It's like, yeah, sometimes the steering wheel is on the left-hand side of the car and sometimes on the right-hand side of the car. That's really weird. But in the end, she ends up poisoning the double ends up poisoning Sarah, even though it's like it was so telegraphed and so obvious. Like it was just like, oh my God, there's no ambiguity at all. No, anyway, she kills her, but she goes back to her life. And then like after the whole thing's over, you find out that her boyfriend Peter and Sarah's mother were in on this. But then like Peter's treating her terribly again. Is like, oh, you're putting on weight. You want to exercise. You need to put sunscreen on every day because you're redheaded. So your skin's sensitive. You're starting to get wrinkles and you're starting to get older. I'll love you no matter what, but like take care of yourself. And the mother keeps calling and she doesn't want to answer the phone with the mother. She's upset with her already. And then she drives off and she's having she has kind of like a breakdown because she inherited a life that was pretty miserable, and she fought and died. She fought and killed her original to take over her life that wasn't even that great. But the scene before
she
that,
knew the pitfalls going in. Like she knew the problems her original
that's
had
the thing
with that, and now she's fallen into
that's
the
the
same
thing that
problem.
gets me. In that scene before, she was telling Sarah, "It's like, oh yeah, your mother. I hate like your mother. My relationship is disintegrating with her. Peter and I aren't getting along that well anymore." But then she still goes along with Peter and Sarah's mother's plan to kill the original Sarah, knowing what she was getting into, knowing she was going to inherit that miserable life. And that's what I mean when I'm talking about like character motivations not making sense. It's like everything that they built up, even that scene after the support group, is like, oh, the double is like, oh, her life is turning out miserable like Sarah's, so she wants to go away. But it's like, no, she's killing her for the miserable life that she knew was miserable. I mean, it doesn't even track. Like it'd be one thing if she found out afterwards, like, oh, if afterwards they started treating her differently, but they were already starting to treat her terribly. Why would, like, it didn't make any one lick of sense. I was like, and the way she was like poisoned is like, oh, here, take this water, and like looking, she might as well turn and winked at the camera and said, it's definitely not poisoned. Wink. Like it was so
Weren't
telegraphed.
you asking them to wink at the camera earlier in this conversation?
It would have been something if they would have turned to the camera. Some of them were just literally talking about.
So we got one wink
to
to the camera for you.
Yeah, but she's like, "Oh, take another bigger drink, just to make sure you have enough water." I was like, "Oh my, like, no, like, oh, it was so terribly delivered."
Yeah, because earlier in the film, she's going through like she's trying to identify the different methods of like how this person died in these photos. And Sarah falters on the poison one, right? She doesn't get it right, which is sort of a foreshadow on how she's actually going to die later on.
But that whole scene after
with all that being said,
so go ahead. Sorry, I've been talking too long.
I was just going to wrap up the episode. No, I was going to wrap up the episode. If you want anything else to say, go ahead.
No. Like I think you were talking about. I think we should talk about the actors because Karen Gillan still did like you could see. There were a couple scenes where she was like actually allowed to act, and the scene where she was acting against herself. I know that's always probably tricky for actors to be in a scene with themselves and do that double, but she did a really good job. It's nice to see Aaron Paul show up. I really hope that post Breaking Bad, he would show up in a lot more stuff. So it's always great to see him there as well. Like Karen Gillan and Aaron Paul did a great job.
They're really not. I mean, the boyfriend, I didn't recognize the actor. But really nobody else had like a named role in the film.
Yeah, there were very few actors I recognized. It was mostly Karen Gillan and Aaron Paul. They were doing like there were a couple moments they had together. Like even that moment where they where like Karen Gillan or Sarah rather, where she had to, because of the whole legal issue, she was like paying support to her clone. So just like to add insult to injury. And so she was part of the whole thing was like, oh, the duel got delayed because of weather for another month. And she was like, oh, I spent my last money on like, an outfit, like clothing for the duel. And I was like, I have no money left. Yeah. And Aaron Paul had made a comment earlier, but it's like, oh, we can find alternate forms of payment, something that's mutually beneficial. And of course, like the way he says it, it's like, oh, you think it's like, oh, he's a slime ball and he's going to make her pay. Right. He's going to force her into sex. But really it goes down as like, if it was done in a better movie, maybe with a better script and a better director, it would have come off better. But it's like there was still a bit of like a comedy beat where what he wanted was for her to teach him how to hip hop dance because he was too scared to go to a class because he didn't feel he was any good. And so that was what he talked. That's the alternate payment that he wanted. And it was like, it's a fun little quirky character beat.
What did you think of the scene where essentially at the end of their training, Aaron Paul's character Trent is asking Sarah to shoot his dog with like a crossbow? What was happening in that scene? Did he really want her to shoot the dog?
It's left ambiguous.
Or was that just a terrible, like that was just a draft of that made its way into the script in the final movie?
The way it played out was like, it seemed like he didn't care one way or the other.
Yeah.
But like, that was actually a good example of when she turns and she sees, so they're doing this thing where part of the training, he brings his dog and says like, oh, this is my dog. Go grab the crossbow off the shelf. It's like, okay, now like my dog is old. He's like, he's had a good life, but now he's sick and he's in pain. I want you to shoot my dog. I was like, and she can't bring herself to do it. But then she sees like her double in the window watching her, and she turns really quickly and fires out because she's been training to kill herself. So it's like instinct. It's like, oh, I saw my double, so I go shoot. And like Aaron Paul actually, he has like, what are you doing? And like you can see, is like, oh, there's a human being, there's human emotion there sometimes. But like afterwards, he says something about like, oh, or before that maybe when she refuses to shoot the dog, he's like, oh, I'm like. You don't have the killer instinct, but I'm
very
also glad.
Deadpan.
I'm also glad my dog is still alive. It was like, okay, so like,
very deadpan delivery. It's just like you're not entirely convinced that he still likes his dog, or is he really happy that the dog is still alive? Right?
I'm not really sure, but I've seen that. You've seen this similar scenes play out in other movies, like that. As soon as I saw that happen, the movie Kingsman came to mind, where they had the exact same scene played out, and usually, if it's a hero character, the hero never shoots the dog. And so that was, it was a good scene to get. Karen Gillan was actually, you gave her a chance to actually act for a change, which was good. You could see like the expression on her face. And Karen Gillan, I think she's known to a lot of audiences as Nebula in the Marvel franchise, where she's just buried under a bunch of makeup. She still does a great job.
Does she do a good job? I mean, can you see her act with her face in that movie?
As Nebula, I think she does a really good job. But this one you actually saw like for audiences who may not, North American audiences who may not be as familiar with Karen Gillan's work and other roles, to see her actually be able to, like, there's a couple scenes where she's like having breakdowns in the car there, which is like, there was the first time and you just saw like the emotion slowly kind of come over her face, and like, this is pretty amazing, like really good acting. That's really high praise. Like there was really, really good acting there. And this scene too, where you see the subtleties on her face of the conflicted emotion of she's been training to kill, not just with weapons, but like you would mention where Aaron Paul's training, the trainer there, he was desensitizing her to violence by showing her pictures of terribly mutilated people. And he even like books session with her with a coroner rather, where she's like performing an autopsy on a red-haired woman that looks a lot like her. So she's like trying to desensitize her to death and violence and blood and all this stuff. And so but then you see, it's like, oh, is she willing to kill this dog, this living thing? Will she be able to kill herself if she goes into this duel? Like there were some interesting concepts there, but like I knew as soon as they did it, she wasn't going to kill the dog because she's the hero in the movie. And this movie was playing everything so straight that I knew they weren't going to subvert that trope and have the hero kill the dog. So like there's no tension in the scene, but the actor did a good job.
She did kill a dog after.
Yeah, she did. And there was an irony. And like, again, if the tone of the movie had been different, that could have come off as like a fairly darkly comedic thing where like she fails to shoot this dog.
You didn't find that funny at all?
When she turns and tries to shoot herself, and she accidentally shoots another dog outside, so she does kill a dog incidentally through the whole thing. No, I didn't really feel anything when I saw that. By that time, I was just like...
You didn't find that dark comedy in there?
No, I thought it was like somebody attempting to tell a joke and then failing miserably.
Well, I mean, by that point in the movie, like, I mean... You're gonna hate it at that point anyway.
I was trying to stay focused at that point. I was just like trying to like, Nathan, you can finish this movie. You can do it for Brian.
Well, congratulations on finishing this absolutely awful film. I'm very proud of you. How many times did you check your phone during this 90-minute runtime?
A lot more than normal. I think I've been talking too much about this. I want to hear more about. I think you touched on it before about like why you love this so much though. Like I don't want to get down on like I feel like I'm, like you just got this puppy for Christmas, and I feel like I'm taking the puppy out back and shooting it. No,
not at all. I mean, no, I mean, I mean, if you did that, I think you're a pretty awful person, and I think you're way off the mark on this movie. But I've talked about like why I like it. I like the humor in this movie. I like the dialogue. I like the deadpan delivery. I like the sci-fi elements. I mean, as I said at the very beginning, there's not a lot to this movie. The plot, the story is very simple, and I can really appreciate how focused the movie was on that. And I think I tried to say earlier that I was nervous of it being a slog to get through the second time I watched it, but it didn't end up being that way. I liked it just as much the second time around. So I thought it was appropriate runtime. I liked the sci-fi element. There's a lot of stuff I liked here. Karen Gillan did a fantastic job acting against herself for most of the movie. Aaron Paul. I mean, I need to see this guy in more things.
Yeah.
And no, I thought things were really really groovy here.
Yeah. So like, obviously, your recommendation in terms of like, you're gonna pick this up when it comes out, Blu-ray.
Well, yeah, of course. Yeah, definitely.
Right on. I would.
And this is not even like a dollar store pickup for you, right?
I mean, if it comes out for $1, I might pick it up. I'd buy that for $1. But like, I'm not going on my way to watch this. Even if I bought it, would I watch it again? I don't know. But I will say, I am going to give, was it Riley Stearns was the director's name?
Yes.
I'm going to give Riley Stearns the benefit of the doubt. I'm still cautiously optimistic that The Art of Self-Defense is going to be more up my alley. I don't want to be completely negative. I know I said some, I was kind of down on his directorial efforts on this one, but I'm not giving up on him.
So The Art of Self-Defense on Letterboxd has an average of 3.5 compared to Duel's 3.2. So take that for what it is. Probably not a big enough jump that if it's the same style, I think you would enjoy it, but
we'll see. I'm not giving up completely. I'm going to try.
I'm definitely interested in checking his other work out there, but yeah, I don't recognize any of the other movies that are like in this filmography here.
Yeah, this was definitely no The Northman and definitely no Everything Ever All at Once. Not even the same ballpark, not even the same league, not even the same sport.
It's not even a movie at that point.
It's an artifact. It's a film artifact that exists, I guess. It is what it is.
It's an interesting take on a film that is obviously very personally hated by you. I felt like it was like something personal going on here.
Yeah, personally, I like good films, so that was what. I will say.
I mean, and I'm not trying. Like, I know I brought up a couple things of like the dialogue in Transformers and Star Wars is infinitely worse than the dialogue in this movie, and I've kind of like attacked you on that, and I'll just attack you on one more movie. Is that you've rated Venom 2, Let There Be Carnage higher than this film, which is a travesty and a question mark on your movie critic membership.
I will say why I would like that movie better, Venom, Let There Be Carnage. I'm not going to, only in this context. Normally, I think you and I, Brian, is like, I'm not going to argue that Venom, Let There Be Carnage is Shakespeare in any capacity. But that film, like tonally, it knew what it was. And I think that's a difference where like, oh, I'm in on the joke at least. It's like, I didn't really, like compared to most superhero movies, Venom, Let There Be Carnage is like, it's not going to win any head-to-head competition against 90% of superhero movies, like even Marvel's.
Or 90% of movies in general.
Yeah. I mean, it was a fun ride. It wasn't trying to change the world, but this, I felt like Duel was it had an intent to say something deep and philosophical.
You thought it had big, lofty ambitions?
This is the thing, right? It had these, it felt like, oh, this is an indie sci-fi flick, something like Lapsus, which I think we watched last year, which I think was really, really good. You should check that one out. But I think like tonally, it was more on point. It matched, like the tone matched the dialogue, and like the tone was communicated clearly through the direction and through the acting. And I think it was a lot more focused, and it was actually, you could tell like thematically they weren't stating the themes outright, but there was like, oh, I know exactly what you're trying to explore here. And Duel is just like, it's a really interesting concept. And I had high hopes I was really hoping that this would be another one of those kind of surprise little indie films that, like I could latch onto and was like, oh, like this is somebody who has passion for film.
You really wanted the hidden gem. Yeah.
I did. And like, I got to give the filmmakers props. They were giving it their all. Like I hate when people say like low effort films or things like that, where it's like, like there's potentially something small like this. There's dozens, maybe even hundreds, I don't know, but like on a bigger movie, there's hundreds of thousands of people in multiple departments, and they're giving it their all. And sometimes things work and sometimes they don't. So I don't want to. I try to never say that it was from a lack of effort. I think you can tell the people are like this is a passion project. It felt like.
I think you've said the complete opposite in this review here, is that they put in extraordinarily low amount of effort, or they just have absolutely no skill. I think you might have said that before when talking about this. So I don't think your sincerity in saying the directors and stuff gave it all, their all.
Well, I think he gave it his all and failed miserably. I think, I don't know if it felt like it was a first draft. So like maybe he did his best on the first draft and maybe it was never reviewed by anybody. This is why editorial reviews are important, folks. It's why you always do at least one read through for proofreading purposes. Yeah, I don't know. I was trying to be conciliatory here, and like I'm trying to kind of blunt my. I didn't want to come off.
Why
as like,
bother though?
What do you mean?
I mean, the movie is rated so low. Like, why try and like justify, like try and like throw out a bone for some positivity on it?
There is a difference,
you know what I mean?
Between critiquing the art and critiquing the person, right? And I think that the effort on this one, it was a failure, but I don't think it was for lack of passion. I think the people making it believed in what they were doing.
I mean, like as you said earlier, he's just bad at writing, but that's not. I mean, he could still try, and he did try here.
I think maybe writing is not his strong suit. I have to, based on this movie, based on this one data point, I think he's terrible at writing. Yeah. Yes, I think, but I don't think it's because of a lack of passion. I think he obviously cares about. I think he feels he has something to say. I just don't think it came across in the movie at all. Like I didn't feel like there was a deeper exploration of some of these themes. Like it felt like on a surface level, brought up an interesting idea of nature versus nurture. What does it mean? Like questions of identity. And like, that's right up my alley. And I felt like he, to use a sporting metaphor, felt like, as he did in the movies, like I felt like he fumbled the ball. Only, there was a pop fly, only he didn't have a glove. He was blindfolded and both his hands were tied behind his back. Maybe that was to borrow his own sporting metaphors.
Fair enough. It was interesting. I was reading a thread about Chris Stuckman. You watched him, right? On YouTube, his movie criticisms.
He's making a movie now.
Yeah, so he's making a movie now, a really huge Kickstarter. But there was some criticism where people said over the past couple of years, they've noticed his positivity in every single review, where he stopped critiquing the individuals behind the movie. And I think they took it in a way that was like, he obviously wants to get into the movie industry, and you don't make friends by like openly critiquing them on YouTube, right? And it was just like, well, because for me, I try to avoid that stuff because I want to see the positive. Like these people have insanely more talent than I am. Obviously, they're getting movies made. They've done something right? So it's just like, I mean, it's difficult. As you sort of said before, like there's hundreds of people involved in the making of a movie. Anything could go wrong and make like a poor product. Like nobody goes into a movie trying to make a bad movie, but it can just happen.
And I think,
I think that's where like for him, like some of the criticism on him being not positive or him being too positive about like people might be misconstrued.
Yeah, I think for me, like Corridor Crew sometimes too falls into that, where they've gotten bigger, have more guests on, and it feels like they're more reticent to actually critique some of the more, to use their own word, some of the more janky elements in the whether it be stunts or animation or the special effects. And partially that's because they have the actual people on now who worked on those movies, so you're not as free. I think that's a normal human thing. Is like you don't feel like you're as free to criticize that person's work then, because you have empathy then for that person, where you're a little bit more. Before they were a bit more objective because they didn't know anybody in the industry, right? There was nothing, there was no stakes there. And right now, I don't know anybody in the industry. You don't know anybody in the industry. I think we're a bit.
Even the last episode there, I don't know if you watched yesterday's episode of Corridor Digital there, but they're like, we critiqued like this guy. He was a guest on the show before. And it's like, they really want us to critique Black Widow, and they chose one scene they could critique. And it's like, it wasn't like a significant scene by any means, but it's like, that's them kind of playing it safe and critiquing someone's work that they had on the show.
And they were still super nice about the critique too.
They were super nice about it. Yeah.
I think in any other context, like the scene they picked wasn't even that great. And the scene they picked was like, the giant explosion came up in her face and she was perfectly fine. Like,
Yeah.
of all the lighting and everything, like that was unfortunate. Like,
Well, seeing
yeah, and that's what I was trying to get at. I know I was being a little bit hyperbolic in my criticism, but I'm trying to be fair to like difference between like the person and the work. But also, like, as I said, that's one of the reasons too. Like, I'm still stoked to see The Art of Self-Defense. I'm hoping that this was like because even movies by directors that I love that still I don't like every single movie by every director equally the same. So like, I'm not giving up on him. I'm not going to be like, oh, I'm never going to watch his movies again. But this one for me was a failure. Like, I gotta call them like I sees them.
That's a wrap on another episode of the Real Film Chronicles podcast. Thank you for listening and hanging out with us today. We really appreciate your support and look forward to you joining us for the next episode. We can be found around the internet and social media, with our home base being realfilmchronicles.com, which will have all the links you need to follow and keep in touch with us. Until next time, take care of yourself and others, and keep your film journey going.